Genesis chapter 6. Hey, oh, it's going to go up for auction. Ooh, that'll be good for the tithes. Yeah, actually, it could be bad for the tithes. We'll have to pay someone to take it. All right, so today we're going to talk about the minority, and Bruce mentioned a little bit in his testimony about how many people respond positively to the gospel, and that many religions and denominations take pride and boast in their large number of followers and the rate they're growing, although apparently Christianity and maybe religion in general is declining these days. But when you look at the scriptures, you notice that the truth that runs through the whole scriptures is God has always worked with a minority. He certainly worked with the individual one-on-one to achieve his mission, and he's never really worked with what you might call the majority. Although his invitation is to the whole world to follow him, to do what he asked us to walk in his ways. But he just knows that the heart of mankind is evil, and so most people are not going to end up taking up that offer that he puts out there. And so I just wanted to talk today a little bit about the reasoning and the thoughts behind the mindset of the being in the minority, and how we approach that, what the Bible says about it, because we know that at least in society, there's this safety. It's seen as safe to be in amongst the large numbers of people, all thinking the same thing, all comfortable, not stepping out of line, not causing a fuss. So that is the place that our natural mind wants to drift to, so that we can have that comfort. But you probably know that's from the scriptures. I mean, you can even just read the scriptures about how many will follow the Lord. You know, automatically it's like, oh, these large thoughts and ideas in the world are probably not where the truth is, just based on the word of God, let alone the actual facts of, analyzing what people are following. So just wanted to start off in Genesis chapter 6 and look at a couple of examples in the Old Testament, not the full stories, but just the mindset of people in the minority. And reading about Noah here, and we'll start in verse 5 of Genesis 6. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Very sort of strong words there, isn't it? Like the imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. It never abated. Verse 6, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, from the creeping thing and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. So at the time of Noah, the world was a disgrace. It'd be interesting to know, comparison to today, how it was. And it says that even God repented of making man, and so it must have been bad. And that Noah and his family was selected out to be saved, if you like. And just thinking about how Noah existed in that day and age, because he was selected because he was a just man. And sometimes the world can overcome us, and its negativity, its ways, and its corruption can overcome us. But Noah found a way to to exist and still walk in the Lord, as it says in verse 9 there. And so, sometimes it almost seems like too tough a task to walk with God, because everywhere we turn, there's just something trying to derail us. Like whether it's the people we run into, that you turn on the TV and it's just constant bombardment of alternate ways that are not God's ways. And sometimes it can seem so hard, but think about what it was like for Noah. And it's just wanted to hone in on that verse. He was a just man, and he walked with God. And where did it say? Oh yeah, verse 8. He found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And so, in a way, when you boil it down, it was just such a simple thing. He just walked with God. He followed God's instructions, commandments, and suddenly the living God has found grace is bestowed grace on him and chosen to save him. And so when you boil things down and you cut away all the nonsense and the complexity, it's very easy for us to walk in the Spirit if we're just focused on that. Because the doing that part is easy. It's the not doing all the other stuff that's hard. So we need to be motivated to be found having grace with God. Turn to Genesis chapter 8, forward a little bit. Chapter 8. And looking at Noah's response here, Genesis chapter 8 and verse 18. And Noah went forth, and I think, so this is after the flood and everything. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creeps upon the earth, after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savour. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. So this is after leaving the ark, leaving that time of trial. And what does Noah do? Does he get out of the ark and set up one of those folding banana chairs and just bask in the sun and the glory and like, I've made it, like I'm so good? Or what does he do? Well, he sacrifices to the Lord. He responded to God's grace, and he took the clean animals. He sacrificed the best of the animals, and the Lord smelled it as a sweet savor. And so likewise, what do we have to do in our lives today but respond to God's grace by sacrificing our time, directing our energy towards the Lord, devoting our lives to the Lord, because he doesn't want, he doesn't need the produce of our work, our labor in the Lord, but we need it. We need to be focused on what we should be doing. And so, the only way that you can please the Lord is by following his commandments. And unfortunately, that means sacrificing the other things that we could be doing in our life and keeping focused on the simplicity of what he wants us to do. So back to Noah a little bit, just thinking about his being in the minority and, the time of building the ark when he would have no doubt been mocked and ridiculed. And the challenge with being in the minority generally, just general life, I think is that you tend to want to be quiet, you tend to weaken. Maybe there's a bit of shame, maybe a bit of guilt, maybe to put it in modern terms, a bit of gaslighting. Look, are you crazy for doing something so strange? And this could apply at school. School is obviously a place where the minds are young, and especially young minds don't want to stand out or stick out, and so it can be any walk of life that we have. And the minority mindset can even lead to bitterness and anger, like accepting your role and accepting your fate as being in the minority, and then just being angry and bitter about it. Maybe some of you have seen some religious things in that area, where it's almost like some religious groups get angry and bitter and just take it out on the rest of the world and take it out on people and have very strange ways of behaving. But so that's kind of like the way the natural mind might deal with being in the minority. But Noah's example was being calm, resolute, doesn't record anywhere that he had any doubts, doesn't record that he took time off from building the ark, time off to reestablish his thoughts, to sort of evaluate what is he actually doing here? Why is he doing this? But the mind he had was this contentment, this resolute mind. And thinking about the start of the Christian church, and it's sort of it's interesting to think that when the day of Pentecost, when the Christian church first started, there was no minority of truth in the Christian world, because there were 3,000 souls saved, and that was it. Day one, there was probably no corruption, or I'm guessing things started to corrupt very quickly with the gospel. But day one, 3,000 people, all spirit-filled, on fire for the Lord, no minority, just a majority of believers. And from there it went downhill through the ages, and the paganism and the corruption that came in. They say we have 2.5 billion Christians in the world now, so-called Christians. I think it's 32% of the world, and 26% is the Muslim or the Islam religion. And so, again, going back to the word, if you think about it, from what the world says, 2.5 billion Christians probably aren't all going to heaven, probably aren't right. They certainly don't agree with each other, but probably not scriptural to think that, just slotting into that massive amount of people, what is that, a third of the world, is going to make you right. So we know that it's just not about slotting in. Turn to Joshua chapter 14, another little thought here on the mindset of someone in the minority. Joshua chapter 14 and verse 6. But first, we know, so we're talking here about Joshua and Caleb, the spies, who we know, I think there was 12 spies sent out. So we know that they weren't in the majority. They came back with the positive report of spying out the land that God said they should take, and the other spies are in the negative camp, in disagreement with God's promises, and that's what dispersed into the greater children of Israel and their thinking and their fear. So we're actually reading here of years later, after the spies were sent into land, and just reading a little bit about, I think, what the looking back view of that time. And so in verse, where is it here? Verse 6 of Joshua chapter 14. Then the children of Judah came unto Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said unto him, Thou knowest the thing that the Lord said unto Moses, the man of God, concerning me and thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was in mine heart. Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses sware on that day, saying, Surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thine inheritance, and thy children's forever, because thou hast wholly followed the Lord my God. So, what a great looking back view of what Joshua and Caleb did, that they wholly followed their God. They are right now assessing this event from a distance. And I like when this happens in the Old Testament, when you see references back to other times, because it makes you realize like these events that are described in the Bible, like if you're reading a story, it can be like, okay, so that happened. But then you realize the grandness of it when they're still talking about it decades later, and the significance of it. So that helps us to realize, like, when, in this case, when the spies were sent to the land and only 2 came back positive, like those people had real faith. It said there that the majority, the majority of the spies, that message caused the people's heart to melt. And so the minority, Joshua and Caleb were not only against the other spies, but against the effect that the other negative spies had on the majority. And so, again, this fear that they had, that quickly took hold, because those negative things are much easier to take hold in the human mind. And that's what the masses there coalesced around, this sentiment of like, we can't go in and do that. Like, did you hear what these spies said? That's crazy thinking. And yet Caleb and Joshua knew the promises of God and steeled themselves to stick to the truth. Like, yes, we see that, and we see that God's promised to have us to conquer the enemy. Turn back to Numbers chapter 14. Just now going back to the time of this event, just wanted to point out, what did Joshua and Caleb do at the time? What was their mindset at the time? And Numbers 14 and verse 4. And they said to one another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. So this was the people's attitude, is like, we're out of here. This is a ridiculous idea. Let's go back to Egypt. It was better there. Verse 5, then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it, it is an exceedingly good land. The Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land, and give it us a land which flows with milk and honey. So they actually rent their clothes. They tore their clothes. They were that passionate and like on the same wavelength as the Lord, which was so far apart from what the people were thinking. So a sign of their, the grief or dismay. It's sometimes hard for us to like visualize and understand this whole idea of tearing your clothes. Like if Chris's next talk, he was just so passionate and he just started, doing the Superman thing, it'd just be a bit weird. But nevertheless, we know there's some, it's dismay, it's grief. It's like, are you taking this seriously kind of thing? Really involved. But they certainly weren't timid. Like that weak mindset I talked to you about, like being in the minority, that was not them. That was not their mindset, because they were imploring the people to realize the promises of God. Um, let's see. Oh, Irie, could you please, or someone could, I just had some things to show. Yeah, like could you share the Firefox screen? I didn't get time to do proper slides, so I just hacked some, yeah, it's no videos, but yeah, whatever. This this has nothing to do with the talk. It's just I need a slide so you can't see the real slides, and this was literally just on the website at the time. So just for a bit of lighthearted thoughts here about how society will use, well, so what we've talked about here with the children of Israel is that their majority mindset was just, it was pretty much just out of fear, like facts and like, spies came back, gave their report, the people were weak-minded, they weren't thinking about God's promises, and it was just fear. But I was thinking about how much more in these days and over the centuries, when mankind has sought to actually control the masses or to promote things with a deceptive kind of mind, to change thinking across the board. And so I read about this guy. Can you go to the next slide? Edward Bernays. He's known as the godfather of PR.
How do you get to the next slide?
No. Oh, so the tabs at the top. Just yeah. This guy doesn't look shifty at all. Godfather of PR, godfather of propaganda. He's known as. He was born in the late 1800s, I think. Only died in like 1995, which is weird to think. He was still around in the 90s. But I'll just read you a little bit about him. His uncle was Sigmund Freud, and he did get into the psychology stuff, and he described the masses as irrational and subject to herd instinct. And he outlined how skilled practitioners could use crowd psychology and psychoanalysis to control them in desired ways. So what did he do? He set about his life to helping companies and presidents and governments to help them put forth messages that they wanted to do. And you can imagine it wasn't very good. The first example is very harmless. He helped to name, there's a president committee, which was called the Committee for Unemployment. And he renamed it the President's Emergency Committee for Employment. So, he's just starting to tweak things and try and do the propaganda or the PR thing, probably more PR in this case. But his best known campaigns included a 1929 effort, can go to the next one, next tab, to promote female smoking by branding cigarettes as feminist torches of freedom. Because at the time, female public smoking was like not seen as a good thing. It wasn't a very good thing at all. So he set about to make it a good thing. And he used the feminist movement to say like, you're being restricted. And he coined this phrase, torches of freedom, meaning cigarettes. He started working for the American Tobacco Company, and he had to increase sales of Lucky Strike, increase sales among women, that is. And yes, the first strategy was to persuade women to smoke cigarettes instead of eating. Can you go to the next tab? And he came up with the idea of promoting thinness and using photographers and artists, newspapers, magazines to promote this idea of beauty. They promoted the ideas of cigarettes over sweets by using the medical authorities to say that, much healthier choice, smoking cigarettes over having sweets. And they were encouraged to keep cigarettes on hand at home because, of social reasons, that it's a good social thing to have on hand. And can go to the next one. just another, the next tab.
Yeah, this is.
Yep, okay, that's good. And I'm just cutting down just a little bit about this guy, but he's very well known, very behind the scenes guy. And what do you think this guy thought of what he was doing? Well, during all these campaigns, he did not want his name mentioned, not even spoken. He concealed the fact he was working for the American Tobacco Company. He kept his name out of everything. Staff were instructed never to mention his name. Like they set up shell companies so that like he couldn't be traced to it. And so you get an idea of like how in his core, if he had any morals left, that he probably didn't want his name attached to the ways he worked. Various people received payments to promote smoking publicly as if it was their idea. So he used people to help. Like his job was to increase smoking, but he didn't necessarily want his name attached to it. However, as you might imagine, we've seen this a lot. Decades later, after people get old and they feel like I didn't get enough credit. So decades later, this guy boasted about his role. So initially wanted to be behind the scenes and not known, and then eventually he's like, that was me, I did all that, really proud of it. Even behind the scenes, his wife smoked, and he was desperately trying to get her to quit because he knew it wasn't good for you. Anyway, just an example, a silly example about how there's enough struggle with our minds to deal with just facts and fear and things like that. But then you think about what might be being manipulated, or what things that we know of in ways that we just think are normal about society runs, what might be just out and out coming from some man's idea. And sometimes we talk about conspiracy theories and all that, and probably most of them are wacky and not real and all that. We can be funny sometimes, but we can't ever say, especially as spirit-filled Christians, can never say that but every institution is on the up, and the government's not being deceptive and all this. Like, I agree that conspiracy theories can be wacky and all that, but if you look at the Bible, it's like, I just listened to Pastor Graham Hazeldine's, there was a talk on the podcast about the number of the beast, I think it was called, and you just listen to that talk and it's just mind-boggling about how the Bible links into the corruption of mankind's religions and institutions and all that. It's crazy. So let's turn to Psalm chapter 34. I still have more, but I'll tell you when. So coming back to sort of just mainstream Christianity, we talk about all the time, of course, because we live in the Bible Belt here, probably maybe the only Bible Belt left in the world, and we always talk about the difference between mainstream Christianity and what's in the Bible. We know the differences. There's no doubt many people that have good intentions and living quite reasonable lives by worldly standards, so it's not to mock those kinds of things at all. But when you think about institutional Christianity and the kind of the movements that seek to make it a very comfortable, lavish kind of life that you're encouraged to live, think about, I just wrote this about Bible Christianity and the experience people had, singing choruses in cold prison cells, quiet prayer in small houses with blood painted over the doorpost, the slavery of the Israelites, Job's trials, Stephen's stoning, the execution of John the Baptist, the scattering and persecution of the early Christians as they were chased all over the land. And then even in our fellowship today, the underground churches in China and Pakistan, and the way they have to have meetings and all that we've heard, I think Pastor Paul talk about recently, and hearing about the tough thing they have because they just want to follow the truth. So it's not necessarily a pretty lavish lifestyle. And in Psalm chapter 34, read a bit in a psalm about what could be thought of as the Christian life. Psalm 34 and verse 1. I will bless the Lord at all times, his praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around them that fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusts in him. O fear the Lord, ye his saints, for there is no want in them that fear him. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. And so the Lord has this, he sets up a life for us that is not overly distracting and overly opulent for like how we should live. He doesn't want us living in a life of, like I've said, lavishness that it may be a distraction to us. But the Lord's life that he has for us is like a sustaining life. He provides us things that we need to continue our relationship with him, to have a strong relationship with him. To New Testament about the daily bread. He's giving us sustenance spiritually to get through this life, to get through this world and the society that is not compatible with following the Lord, because the ideas are so different. So we have to have that dependence on God that it talks about in this Psalm 34 here, and to have contentment, and to have provision, and to be not starving because the Lord provides for us, but to also not be distracted by the pleasures of life. And we talked about China and Pakistan fellowships and things like that, and we obviously have it pretty good here in the USA and in the Western countries, where so far we are not under some kind of persecution for merely following the Bible. Thinking about Jesus' time, how he lived his life, how his followers lived, we can see that even in his time, he was not really popular. He wasn't really popular, meaning across the society at the time. He was attacked for what he did. What he did and his mission was only positive. It was only good. It was only restoring souls. But at that time, the society mocked and ridiculed him. And it's just, when you think about it, his mission was so good and so positive, and so how can the world be so against that? It's just a paradox to think about. He even had nowhere to lay his head at night, it says. So he was certainly not living the 30 private jet life that we hear about maybe we should have. I was thinking about how it describes numerous places in the epistles and Acts that the early church met in houses, and it it was sort of like no one was rich and no one had, I guess they tried to meet in synagogues and preach the gospel and see people converted, and no doubt that happened. But generally they were not welcome there and chased out. So they met in houses and buildings and things like that. Well, usually homes. I looked up, when did church gatherings in some kind of building start happening, and you can go to the next tab. They found this place in Syria called Dura Europus, and they think it's from around 240 AD. They say it's the earliest church gathering place that they've uncovered. They don't know if this is still standing today because of when the ISIS thing happened a few years ago, where they just destroyed all the ruins. So they can't even get to this place, I don't think, to figure out if it's still there. But this place apparently was converted from a home, someone's home, to be a church, and they think it's the earliest Christian church gathering place. They discovered it in 1933 when they excavated it. And you can go to the next tab. This is what they think it may have looked like when it was used. If you can't read it, it's just sort of like a gathering place, a meeting place, a courtyard, somewhere where they might have food together. And there's I think a baptism area, perhaps a Sunday school place, it says. So, it's just interesting that, again, the being in the minority, even back then, was not particularly in the natural appealing. But of course, we know the true gospel is not about that. It's about having that relationship with God, and having what we need as a fellowship to encourage each other, to gather together, to build each other up, and those kinds of things. I looked up, for what it's worth, statistics on how many Christians are born again, born of water and of spirit, which we know is a requirement in John chapter 3. And it says some things, who knows if this is right, doesn't really matter, but 25% of evangelicals say they've spoken in tongues, but most don't identify as Pentecostal or charismatic. According to a 2007 survey, 1/3 of American Pentecostals say they speak in tongues at least once a week, and half say their services have something with speaking in tongues happening at the church. And then another survey says that, many Pentecostal types don't actually speak in tongues. So you're thinking, again, you got Christianity, then you've got whatever evangelicals is, or charismatics or whatever, and 25% that actually said they've spoken in tongues. And then you come down to Pentecostals, like, how many of them actually speak in tongues? I mean, prayer in the Spirit is just a basic thing we're told to do. It's in the Bible. Like, you got to pray in the Spirit. You look in 1 Corinthians 14:14 about what praying in the Spirit is. Okay, it's speaking in tongues. Okay, so we got to do it. What does it do? Jude, it builds up our faith. Just fundamental Christian things. But when you filter down to figure out how many people actually do this, it's just a massive minority. I mean, that's not the right phrase. It's a tiny minority. It's just incredible to think that in our world, so few people just follow the basics of being a Christian. Turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. Seeing time here, first time I look at the time, might actually have to skim past this. Well, I was going to read verses 1 to 4, which talks about the terrible attributes of mankind, being self-centered, lovers of money, and all those kinds of things. Maybe we'll just read verse 5, where it says that people will have a form of godliness, but deny the power thereof. From such turn away. And so, if we take the previous 4 verses that we didn't read, but you know them probably pretty well, all the negative things that mankind does, and then it puts in verse 5 that these people would follow God, but would just be a form of godliness, but they would deny the power, which we know many of them do. And, wanting the image of being a follower of God, but not wanting the power. And why would that be? Why would it be good to be a pseudo-Christian? Why would it be good to have the image, but there's power, but you don't want any part of it? And I think it's because, if God's real and he's got real power, being born of Spirit, having the infilling of the Holy Spirit, as in Acts 2, signs, miracles, wonders, power is something you can't really just do part-time. You can't have a relationship with God where sometimes you believe in the power and sometimes you don't. So most people who call themselves Christians don't want that part of the experience, which is actually the only experience, but they don't want to be involved in that because they know that their life would have to be different. And how many testimonies have we heard where people, I think Julie was like that. She's like, put things on hold for a couple of months because she's like, this is going to change my life. This is a massive commitment. When you hear testimonies like that, you realize they understand the power and they know that it's going to change their lives. And most people are like, yeah, okay, there's something there, but I don't want to know about it because that's going to take away from all the things that I want to do in my life and the pleasures of life. I'd have to cancel some of those things. Turn to Isaiah chapter 29 to finish on. Isaiah chapter 29. And verse 13. Wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. And they say, who sees us? And who knows us? And think back to that Edward PR guy. It's a very interesting case of someone that had so much power in the world, but it can be anyone. Anyone can decide to do things that are shifty and then try and hide it from the Lord. In verse 16, surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. Shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he has no understanding? And this is what where our society is, that we're so far from God that we don't even believe there's a God. We've completely corrupted not just a gospel but basic logic. And so I guess the message today is just, especially if anyone's watching this, I guess there's no one new here, but if you're new, don't let centuries of beliefs and established beliefs just dictate to you what's right. Just go back to, the Bible's the number one book available in the world. Just look into the Word and find out what it's about. Even if you don't believe God, if you call yourself a Christian, you can always go back to the source, no matter what phase you're in your journey. Always go back to the Bible and just simply read it. And then the great news is you can enact it in your life, and you can have God confirm his word to you. You can have God give you an experience that you will have faith, you will know that he is real. And we'll just leave it there. And